Thank you for joining us today for this special event, the Data Talk with the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing. I'm Dr. Jacqueline Allison, or Dr. J, and I'm so grateful to have you here. I'm also joined by Kate. Want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Kate Herman, Dr. Kate, the residency analyst with the Residency Lab.
And I would also like to ask Dalia Huerta to introduce herself.
Hi, good morning. Dalia Huerta, Program Coordinator for the Californians Dedicated to Education Foundation.
Dalia is like Dr. Kate and Dalia are amazing. Couldn't do any of this work without them, and I'm so grateful for that. If you want to go ahead and advance the slides, please. So as you know, here's our mission here at the lab. Build a system of teacher residencies in California that transforms the teacher workforce, ensuring that we have a powerfully and prepared, diverse, and thriving teacher workforce that advances educational equity and justice, providing the learning and supports that ensures every student reaches their full potential. And you all are instrumental in this work. Cannot do it without you. You have really, truly transformed the way that teacher preparation is thought about in the state, and really the importance of residency in general and overall. Go ahead, please, next slide. Next slide, please. We are also part of the statewide Residency Technical Assistance Center, which is our statewide collaborator. They are providing targeted developmentally appropriate technical assistance to program participants aligned with residency program outcomes. It's a partnership between 5 county offices of education, and I do believe we have representatives from those county offices here online: Santa Clara County Office of Education, Humboldt County Office of Education, Tulare County Office of Education, San Diego County Office of Ed, and Sacramento County Office of Education. It's also inclusive of a partnership with West Ed, and is doing the evaluation of this work, and UCLA Teacher Education Program, who's also taking a look at all of the equity work and equity focus within SR Tech. And if you haven't met your hub leads, I'm sure you have, but if you haven't, these women or these people are amazing. So I'm so grateful for us to be a part of this. All of our work is rooted in the characteristics and evidence of effective teacher residency programs, right? We launched these in the fall of 2021. They're also a part of all the CTC requests for applications for residency grants. And today's focus includes equity, of course, and I'll explain why in a moment. Partnership. You cannot do this data collection work alone. You have to do this in partnership. Can't do residency work alone. It's that quality and the partnership between the LEA and IET that is so important. And then, of course, use of formative outcome data. Are the ways we prefer to work together today? I think that's the next slide, right? Yeah, so today, again, these are our characteristics. Like I said, partnership and formative and outcome data. The ways we prefer to work together. Please take a moment to think about which one resonates most with you. I think you've all probably are tired of me getting on my soapbox, but I'm always like empower the facilitator. CTC, our partners, everyone, puts a lot of time in to put this information together for us. And so let's show them our love and support as they are sharing all of this content. But what else resonates with you? Being open, pausing, listen actively. Which one resonates most? Go ahead and just take a moment and type that in the chat. Which resonates most with you? And what are you going to uplift and exemplify today? Thank you. I can see them coming in. Thank you all. Great. Okay. All right, Dr. Kate, just continue to be thinking about that and exemplifying that as we work through this day. Thank you. Next slide. So In what ways, this is our guiding question, might your team ensure you are meeting grant reporting requirements? Ways that support continuous program improvement, right? So how are you going to meet these grant requirements and grant reporting in ways that will support continuous improvement of your program? And then considering today's learnings, what might be some next steps for you? Just be thinking about that as we work through this day. You can keep going. It's okay. Yeah. Right. So in just a moment, I'm going to turn it over to CTC and they'll share, and then we'll have some breakout rooms, just kind of have some one-on-one time with CTC folks, and just to answer, and they'll be able to answer any questions that you have. Then we'll do looking ahead and adjournment. I will say that depending on how much, depending on how many questions you may or may not have, we might not go the full 90 minutes. So we might get out of here early, just depends on what happens. Okay, next slide, please. And we do have a poll. I think what we're gonna do, and we'll try to launch it. I was acting a little wonky earlier, but what I would, just let me know if you can see this. If it doesn't work, that's fine. We'll have you answer this question in the chat. Do you see the poll? Yes or no?
Yeah, it pops up.
It popped up? Okay. There's a lot of folks here today. We just wanted to know, are you new to the grant reporting or have you done it before? Keep going. So far, it says we have 27 folks who've taken the poll. I know we have about at least 35 here, so we'll keep going until we get everyone responding. About 7 more folks. I can tell you, I'll share the results back. We still have about 6 more folks who need to respond. -6%. It might be Sarah and Christina that we just stay in one room because the majority of people, 7% of this room, are new to grant reporting. Okay, we may not break out all at all. All right, let me share the results. So, like I said, hold on a sec, Dr. Kane. I don't know if you can see it, but if you can see the results, so 77% of the folks who were able to take the poll are new to grant reporting. Okay, and 7 of you have had some experience with that. Okay, next slide. Sorry, keep going. What happened here? There we go. So I think other thing I wanted to say before I introduced our co-hosts is I'm at the CASA conference, which is the California Association of African American Superintendents and Administrators. And yesterday, opening plenary had Linda Brown. Linda Brown, yes, that's the namesake, right? So this is the 70th anniversary of the Brown versus Board of Education 70 years later. And what she was doing in her presentation was kind of telling her story, telling like the way that she understood the results and how the Brown versus Board of Education, how that all that work came about. And she said there were so many misconceptions about this story and how that happened. And one of the things she said was, if you don't tell your story, someone will tell it for you. And that is where I was thinking about the reason why we're here today. All of you have been doing amazing work in residency, and you're making a difference across the state, right? This is a lean grant fund or lean budget year, right? There's a lot of money at stake, and the residency programs are so impactful and so important. And the data that you report is used for many things. But one of the things it's doing is sharing and telling the success. of the work of residencies across the state. So as you listen to our amazing presenters, be thinking about why you're collecting data, why you're reporting on this data, and how important it is to ensure that residency programs continue and continue and are continuing to be successful in California. So with that, I'd like to now turn it over to Christina Naharo and Sarah Bhavani from CTC. Next slide.
Thank you, Dr. J, and thank you, everybody for being here. So Sarah, if you don't mind, I'm just going to introduce both of us, and Sarah's going to
no
hop in and
problem.
start talking in a minute. So I'm Christina. Sarah is joining me today. We are the residency grants consultants for the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. We work together to support our teacher and school counselor residency programs. Many of you also remember Lynn Larson. Lynn Larson is still with us in our division. She has moved over a little bit more on the accreditation team, but she still supports us with grant reading and on several other roles. And she wanted me to say hi to many of you who are here today who she has worked with. So we are just really glad that you're here today. If we could go ahead and move to the next slide. I believe that this slide deck is shared with you all. So our contact information and a link to our website is here on this front slide. To be 100% honest, Sarah and I probably check that teacher residency grants inbox more frequently than we check our personal email addresses. So that is probably the easiest way to get one of us. We'd like to respond within 24 hours. You'll often get a response even faster than that. So that's the place to reach us. So I really like what Dr. J said about telling the story, and I think that's actually the name of one of these slides here in a slide or two. But there are several reasons why we collect the data that we collect. Obviously the first is a legislative mandate. In order to receive these grant funds, we do have to report back to the legislature and the appropriate fiscal committees on the progress of the grant funding, how it's been used, how programs are implementing, and so on. So, that is the main reason for the collection of the demographics, all of the financial data, expenditures, and placements. We do report to the Commission on Teacher Credentialing and obviously the legislature at the end of the project period, and they are looking at the trends. They are looking at the data. They are very happy to see that teacher residency programs are successfully diversifying the workforce. They are happy to see that teachers are from the 2018 grants, the first round of these grants, teachers are staying in the profession so far at a higher rate than other new teachers. So eyes are definitely on this program. For those of you that have been around for a little while, in 2021, there was a $350 million investment in this program that had a $25,000 per resident support structure. Well, as a result of conversations at the commission table talking about the data that you presented, that per resident support went up from 25,000 to 40,000. So it is important, and this information is making changes in ways that are awesome, and programs really have benefited from the increase in funding and some other flexibilities that the updated legislation gave us in the summer of 2023. So this work that we're doing with West Ed with your spreadsheet data, populating that dashboard, creating those agenda items is really making a difference, and hopefully you're seeing some of those benefits within your own LEA. So not only should you also use this data for your own program improvement, you know, look at your data. Are most of your folks completing their program on their expected completion date? Or do you have a lot of folks who are dropping out? You know, you may be able to tighten up on, you know, recruitment and retention efforts, partnership agreements with your IHE or LEA partner, to make some improvements. But more importantly, I think what you'll see is you're going to see that you have a more diverse teacher workforce entering in your LEA upon hire, and you're retaining these folks. Use that data to go to your own LEA leadership. Tell the story of residency. Why is it working? Why should they continue the investment in this program, potentially after grant funding, sunsets? So that's why we collect the data. It's not just an exercise in everybody's Excel spreadsheet using skills. Okay. It does absolutely tell your story, as I've mentioned a couple times already. Future funding also depends on this. So the 2018 funding started the residency work in the state, the grant funded residency work in the state. There were obviously residencies that were happening before the grant funding started, but that started the data, and that West Ed was able to present for us, and that got us the $350 million reinvestment in the program. A year later, another $184 million was invested to continue the teacher residency and the school counselor residency work. So we are really proud to say that we're getting really close to completely having awarded that whole $350 million. So people are out there doing the work. And if we want to continue having the programs funded through grant funds, you know, we're going to need to, we're hoping for future investments. We obviously know that right now there is a little bit of a state budget issue, but you know, that's going to make this data even more important as folks are making decisions about what they're going to fund in education. So it is important that your data is complete. We collect data on the last business day of July annually. And if we don't have a completed spreadsheet by, you know, from each of our grantees, then the data is incomplete. There are some of you that have, you know, 40-person, 50-person residency programs. One of those not included in the data really skews the numbers and what the optics are. So we absolutely work with you to revise data, to get it into a clean version of your spreadsheet that West Ed can use to compile and populate the dashboard. But getting us that data, it's not just meeting a timeline and meeting a deadline. It really is enabling us to share what's happening throughout the state in a way that could inform some changes. So we're going to go over a couple things here. Sarah's going to take over in a minute, but I think the easiest thing you could do is mark your calendars every month to check the data collection timeline and check out your spreadsheet monthly. And Sarah I'm going to turn it over to her and to tell you what that might look like.
Thanks, Christina. Yeah, so the data collection timeline is posted on our website now, and it also is hyperlinked in this presentation. Would it be possible to take a quick look at that, Dr. J? Thank you so much. So if we scroll down here, you can see what Christina was talking about in terms of marking your calendar for when would be ideal to start collecting certain pieces of data. And this is really helpful so that you aren't doing all of it right the month before it's due. And so we really, really encourage you to start collecting the data as soon as it becomes available to make the entire process smoother. And like Dr. J and Christina mentioned, this is a team effort. So please make sure to work together LEA and IHE partnerships are really, really important in this work. And so if you take a look at the beginning of the school year, August, September, October, you're really going to be completing those program enrollment pieces. So the residents, as they're enrolling in the program, and a lot of demographic information, as well as when they've started their placements in mentor classrooms. If you, one thing about this piece is we do ask for resident seed numbers. And so that is a number that every resident will have if you, once they do their certificate of clearance. And so if you, there is a link right here as well. If you need assistance in looking up that seed number, those are really important to capture as well. And so then scrolling down to the winter months, November and December, you can continue to update that program enrollment tab. And there is also information regarding on each tab that you can start to take a look at program completion as applicable, as well as resident funding, both the grant expenditures and matching expenditures, because again, this is another piece that is a lot easier to do as it is processed, as opposed to trying to go back and log it all at the very end. And so, and then continuing to scroll down, there may be, this year, most of you are doing this for the first time. And so you will not have residents who have completed their years of service yet necessarily, but as the years continue, it is also helpful to start to update those year teaching tabs as soon as possible. So putting in that information, we will go through the tab in detail. I just kind of wanted to take a look at the month by month. And so then scrolling down just into the end of the school year and the summer, you're really just going back every month and taking a look at what you can update. And so then by the time July comes, you really are getting those final numbers in, and that maybe you're doing some updates on any tab, but you're not having to go through and do the entire thing. So really, really focusing on doing a check every month to see what can get updated across the school year, what you might need to check in with your IHE partner about, things like that. I think that's the takeaway from the timeline. So if we can go back to the slides, thank you. So as we mentioned, it really, starting early, starting as soon as those residents are enrolled, getting their names populated and as much information as possible, inputting data as soon as it becomes available across the school year, and really, really revisiting the data as much as possible throughout the school year to ensure that you're not doing it all at one time. If you have not had the opportunity, which I do believe it is linked in the resources as well, our fearless colleague Lynn made a beautiful video walkthrough as well of this. And so if you have questions later and you or just have a question on any tab, she went through very detailed to answer lots of questions. So I'm going to go through it really briefly, but that's just something to keep in mind for later. But this is just the instruction page and the intro page for the spreadsheet. But if you can start to click on the program enrollment tab, this will, Christina is a resident here at our LEA. And so what you will see is that once you enter a resident's name, it will populate across the tabs. And so you, so for the program enrollment tab, you see that seed number that we talked about. You will be putting in the date that they enrolled, the date they started in the mentor's classroom, et cetera, across this spreadsheet. And if you could just scroll to the right a little bit. One thing I wanted to note is that, yeah, you can see there's a lot of information on each tab. This is going to be their credential program and their clinical practice. If you can scroll all the way, I just wanted to note that on every document, on every tab of this spreadsheet, you see column S is the end effectively. We end up using those as notes columns. So if there's ever something that you feel that is not addressed in the pieces of the tab that you're talking about, please make a note for anything that you want us to understand, because sometimes you very much know your residents very well, but we do not know them as well. And so if there's a specific situation, anything you want to explain why there might look like there's an oddity in the data, please put that in the notes tab of the applicable, the notes column of the applicable tab, because we use those to communicate with you. And so then if you want to just click over to program completion, so then does the name populate, Christine? I thought that it did.
I think it's just scrolled down. Oh, it's supposed to.
This might just be it might actually be because it's the template.
Yeah.
But the residents' names should populate for you. And then this is going to be the program completion. So the exams, and then if you scroll across, it's going to end up talking about whether or not they are recommended for a preliminary credential or not. One thing to note is that technically the date that they are recommended for the preliminary credential is considered the date that they have completed their residency program. And then after that date is when you start putting information on those year's teaching tabs. So residents do not start earning their years of service until after they have been recommended for that preliminary credential. And then moving on to the funding tab. Thank you so much. So this is just going to be based on your Appendix G that was submitted, all the appropriate columns that you have spent grant funds for this tab, and the matching funds tab looks exactly the same. It's just for the matching fund expenditures. So please make sure with the grant funds tab, you absolutely need to abide by the program components that were listed in your approved budget. And so please make sure to reference that as you are submitting this data, because that is very important that it is accurate. With your matching funds, you have more flexibility. So if you end up spending money in different areas that were not in your original budget for matching funds, that is okay. But for grant funds, it absolutely has to be the program components that were identified in your approved budget. And then moving on to the year teaching tabs, all four of these look exactly the same. It tells us here's Christine. She made it to this tab. So this is when the residents are hired, at what LEA and what school site, and all of the information regarding their placement or their hiring placement. One thing about, sorry, if you could just scroll back to the hire date. Once again, this needs to be after the resident has earned their preliminary credential. So we know that there are many situations why residents may have a gap between their residency year and their preliminary credential. Perhaps they haven't passed an exam. There's a lot of different situations why they have not gotten their preliminary yet. If they're hired on an intern credential or a PIP or a STIP or anything that's less than preliminary, that is not their hire date for the purposes of this spreadsheet. Okay, and so if that's the case, if they're hired on something less than a preliminary, then we would just make a note in this tab or in the next to their preliminary credential information, just so we know why they don't have a hire date, right? And so we want to make sure that we know that, but we do not put hire dates for anything less than a preliminary. So after they've gotten their preliminary credential is when the hire date comes into play. And then so scrolling across here, I just wanted to see if there's anything else. This is just pretty basic information about the school and LEA placement. And then after that, then we really start taking a look at induction. And this is not necessarily going to happen in year one. Sometimes it starts and so we want to make sure that each year you are building on the previous year. So for example, in year one, if Christina was hired with her preliminary and she does enroll in induction, we're going to put yes, and we're going to put the date that she enrolled in induction. But in future years, when she completes induction, that's not going to go on the year 1 tab because that didn't occur in her year 1 of teaching, right? We're going to make sure that it's following the trajectory of her teaching career as the years go on. And so that's something that, because you all are mostly filling out a brand new form, you can really start and ensure that that is a smooth reporting piece. And then the clear credential, and that's going to happen after they complete induction. And so I see a quick question in a moment. Connie.
I'm just gonna go.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think that just the spreadsheet needs to be filled out. What needs to be on the spreadsheet is what happened in a given academic year. So if the resident was doing their residency program in the 23-24 school year, if they're hired in June, that's great. You can go ahead and put the hire date on. But when WestEd pulls the data for the 23-24 school year, we're actually just looking at the residency year because we're reporting on the enrollments for that year first. We would consider that person's first year of employment. It's true that it would be the 24-25 school year. So we WestEd wouldn't pull that data until the end of the 24-25 school year. The other thing that Sarah did a fantastic job walking us through the spreadsheet. The one thing that I do want to point out is all these little arrows, little gray arrows that you're seeing indicates that there's a drop-down menu. So if the better drop-down menu is probably on the program enrollment tab. So if you look at the credential program as a perfect example, these are the only credential programs allowable for the grant. These are the only ones that were on Appendix D when you applied for the application. You have to stick to these. If you're somehow overriding the drop-down menu by cutting and pasting, we will have you revise back to these exact categories because these are the only ones allowable by the grant. We do see oftentimes people, in their own head, they're thinking, oh, they're a multiple subject candidate. So they just copy and paste multiple subject for a bunch of rows all the way down in the spreadsheet. Well, multiple subjects standalone is not a shortage area covered by these grant funds. So we would have you go back and either put it in multiple subject for TK or kinder, multiple subject with BILA, or diversifying multiple subjects. So please make sure that you are really paying attention to the drop-down menus if you're doing any cutting and pasting.
Yeah, and this is another place where you can reference your application and Appendix D to see where it went, because if we could click on the credential program one more time, there are multiple places where a multiple subject candidate may be, right? And so if you're like, oh gosh, I don't know, are they diversify multiple subject? Are they multiple subject TK? Making sure that you are then just checking your Appendix D to see that might help you determine which one they are supposed to fall under. And then something to Connie's question about the hire date. While WestEd doesn't pull the data for the future years, you may have, even in program enrollment, by the time the report is due, you may have your next cohort, right? You may have their names. That is okay. And in fact, we would want you to put information as soon as you have it so that you aren't having to scramble for it later. But the information, like Christina said, that's going to be pulled is specifically for that previous academic year that just finished. Christina, is there anything else on the spreadsheet specifically that you want to touch on? Okay, I think we can maybe head back to the slides then. Thank you so much.
There's one more question.
Oh, is there? Sorry.
I saw that question just now. You're going to need to make a decision about that as to which category from your approved grant you're putting that person. So let's say you have more than one credential area listed in your application. Let's say it's this example specifically multiple subject TK, and you have multiple subject BILA, and you have diversifying the workforce. If you only have 10 slots and this person does not diversify the workforce, then I would pick from one of those other two categories. It's really up to you. If you just have to adhere to what you put on Appendix D. If you have so many options in Appendix D, completely your decision. I will say what should guide that decision is where you plan to hire that person. Okay, so if the resident is in a credential program where they're, earning a couple things that would allow them to be hired in a couple of different ways, that's great. But their residency experience should match the place that you intend to hire them. If, for example, you say that their residency year was in TK or kinder, and then you're going to end up hiring them in multiple subjects with BILA, we're going to kind of push back on that. And we're going to say, hey, the intent of this legislation is for a very clinically rich experience in the area that this person is supposed to be hired. Why are we not putting them in the proper clinical placement in that case? Okay. So we would circle back with you for a conversation if that does happen. So that should be the guiding force. And if there are other questions on that, we can talk about those during the Q&A in a little while. Yeah, I don't remember what slide we were on. If we could go back to the slides. Yeah, thanks, Kate. All right. I think we were here. Yeah.
Here, right?
Yeah. I think we've talked mostly about this, just, the importance of submitting the data on time so that the cohort throughout the state, the 23-24 cohort throughout the state can be reported at the same time, can be input on the data dashboard at the same time, and there's not a delay with releasing data to the folks that are looking at these numbers. We recommend that you work with and meet with your partners regularly. There really does need to be a relationship, and there really should be a breakup of responsibilities on who's collecting what data. The IHE program really owns a lot of that program completion data. They're the ones that know how many times somebody attempted a TPA. They're they probably have a lot more information. They're the ones ultimately recommending somebody for a preliminary teaching credential. So you're going to need to get a lot of that information from your IHE partner, and the timing is important. If you aren't starting this work according to our suggested timeline, and you reach out to your IHE partner in mid-June, that credential analyst might be on vacation, and it gets really tricky to get this data at the last minute. There are a few things that you are absolutely held to. We talked about two of those things. Appendix D and Appendix G from your application are probably the two most important. You must be enrolling residents and ultimately hiring them in shortage areas that you identified in your application. And you also must spend money according to the way you identified in your application. These aren't things that we dictated for you. You selected these categories. So that's the program that you should have been implementing. If you need to move money around, you may absolutely do that among your approved categories. Okay. So if you selected 5 categories in your budget and you want to move $100,000 from here or there, that's absolutely possible. We need to know about any moves that equal or exceed 10% of the whole grant, of your annual award. Anything under 10%, you can just make that move among your programs. Similarly with your credential areas, if that example that came up, if you have 2 credential types that this person can choose from, make sure that you're enrolling them and ultimately hiring them in the same place. The reporting responsibility should really stay in one house if possible. If the reporting is done through the IHE credential analyst and the HR staff at the LEA, Switching it to the CNI staff at the LEA the next year gets really tricky, especially the larger the program is. You saw that spreadsheet. You saw how many tabs, how many columns, how many rows there are. Once you exceed like 10 residents per year, and we're looking 4 or 5 years down the line, this is a beefy spreadsheet that requires a lot of attention and requires a lot of revisiting. If you have 1 or 2 residents every year who didn't pass the RECA, for example, on time, eventually you have to go back and update it because that person's eventually going to pass the RECA and eventually be recommended for a preliminary credential. So we're going to have to see the accurate picture of each resident told, you know, through the data on the spreadsheet. And you do have to go back and look. This is a living document. It's going to change all the time. So just know that we expect that. We expect that there will be a resident who doesn't pass the RECA every year. You just need to make a note of that, and you need to make sure you go back and you fix it. We also expect, for example, that maybe all $40,000 isn't going to be spent in the residency year. If your application states that folks are going to be using grant funds to pay for induction, we're not going to see those grant funds spent until that person's actually enrolled in induction. Okay, so everything does have to go back to your application, and it does need to make sense and tell the proper story. Okay.
If I could add one thing, I just feel like you guys are at a really great place where this is the first, like, the cleaner that you kind of input things now, the easier it's going to be down the line. And I'm not, that's not to say that you're not going to have an outstanding test result or something like that, but more like the more carefully you complete it now, it's going to be so much easier every subsequent year.
100%. I think we're almost done here. Please notify us if there is a change in your program staffing. Especially the people who sign documents and the people who are the day-to-day contacts. It's really tricky when Sarah and I get bounce back emails because we weren't notified that the new person, or that the day-to-day operating manager of the program got a promotion. We don't know that. And we would like to make sure that we're getting documents to people in a timely fashion. The other thing is establish a process with names and at least with roles, right? So at the very beginning, when you get this grant, sit down with your partners, decide who's gathering and who's collecting what data. Write that name somewhere, because if I leave my position over the summer because my family moved and Sarah is the person who is taking over my position, she shouldn't have to start from scratch with who am I supposed to contact at the IHE? And, believe me, we have absolutely had it where both the LEA representative and the IHE representative leave the same summer. And there is nobody who has remained consistent at either partner. And we have to spend a lot of time tracking people down. So please, if you could help us with making those types of seamless transitions, that would be awesome. I think this is when we said stop and discuss. I would definitely like to hear at this point. So if we could pause right here and not do questions for us, but for those of you who are operating programs, what are some best practices that you all have found with data collection? Is it being regularly? What kind of processes have you established to get the data in a timely fashion that you would recommend to your friends in the field?
Yeah, and I think if it would be great if you could pick those thoughts and put them in the chat.
Okay.
We can call on people to kind of have you share out loud with everyone, but if you could just take a moment and reflect and put that in the chat first, then we can, take a look at that. So we can share it with everybody and learn from your expertise.
While people do that, Christina, can I just ask you one thing? I haven't looked at your, like, this document, the Google Doc, to answer this question, but do you want a certain naming protocol when we send this to you? Is it, what's helpful?
Oh, we actually didn't explicitly explain that here. It is going to be a SharePoint folder with the Excel doc inside. So you actually won't need to rename or send it to us. We will have access to it similar to a live Google Sheet. So yes, so you will not necessarily have to send it. It will be accessible. Thank you.
I'm seeing several things in the chat. For those of you who are meeting regularly with your partners, are you literally like filling the spreadsheet out together? Are you sharing it as, are you downloading into Google and sharing it as a Google Doc, or are you all working on it in the SharePoint folder? Those of you who have done this before, that information would be helpful.
And we did send out the template. I think everyone most likely received that, but we have not sent out Microsoft SharePoint folders yet. We will be doing that soon.
So Christina, we're getting quite a few suggestions in the chat around best practices. Do you want to call on anyone specifically to share more, or would you like to continue into Q&A?
I would like one person who has biweekly meetings with their IHE partner to talk about the structure of those. Who do you invite to those meetings from the IHE? Is it a credential analyst? If somebody could come up and share that, that'd be great. Tiara, maybe.
Sure. We have our dean attends and the vice president of admissions attends, as well as our team here. They work with their credential analysts and bring back information to us.
Awesome. Thank you.
I also, Tiara, like the idea of having one person filling out this specific spreadsheet, but getting the data, right? If you share it out in a different way, but then one person is really only touching this one, because that most likely leads to less room for error.
I think this information is really helpful, Dr. J. So I think we're good to go ahead and move on. The one thing that I will say is Sarah and I both came from LEAs who were on the Google platform, and Microsoft does not necessarily play super well with our friends who are not Microsoft platform users. So, to Tiara's point, it might be easier for you to take the version that we send you through SharePoint, download that version, upload it to Google to share with your partners. If that's the way that you all share documents, that's fine. The way that it needs to come back to us, though, is through that SharePoint folder, because the SharePoint folder, WestEd has access to that as well. So Sarah and I and WestEd can all look at your information live. And if we're on a call with you to review some of, hey, I see this data entry, this data piece. Can we fix the entry in this cell on this tab and on this cell on this tab? Having that update live during that conversation is way easier than emailing back and forth a spreadsheet. Okay. I guess the other thing that we haven't talked about is we realize that this spreadsheet is antiquated and it is a very difficult way to collect data. Okay, we are 100% aware of that. It's as frustrating in practice for you as it is for us. The good news is that we do have a project manager who has been with the commission for about a year now, and they are designing a grant management system for us. It has to have the capacity to take us from application through reporting for all of the grants that we have here at the commission. So it's teacher residency, school counselor residency, classified grants. So there is a lot of work in developing the system, but once it comes, we're very excited to see what it's going to be able to do. So just know that at some point in the life of this grant, there will be a grant management system. We just don't have that release date yet. And then I don't think we had anything else. Oh yes, there was one more slide that I didn't have.
Yes,
Yeah.
next.
So for those of you that have been around, I think you know that Sarah and I are extraordinarily accessible. We respond, we meet with folks regularly. We are here to support you. And it's not just us that's here to support you. We have a lot of friends in the field, specifically our SR Tech and lab partners. So we do host office hours the second Wednesday of every month from 2 to 3. Sarah and I, you have us captive for an hour to ask whatever questions you have. Whenever we have a big due date coming up, we usually hold special office hours too. So in the few weeks prior to the reports being due, we'll host some report office hours as well. You can always email us for one-on-one meetings. Do use our website. There are useful tools for you there. That checklist that Sarah talked about is there. That seed lookup tool is there. We've linked here to this slideshow, the video walkthrough that Sarah talked about. That's where Lynn Larson, our partner, literally walks through column by column by column, every single tab of that spreadsheet. So if you are still brand new to this work and you really want somebody to walk you through tab by tab, column by column, click on that video walkthrough of the annual report. It's fantastic. And then we also have the statewide residency TA center, which we call SR Tech. There's a link to the webpage here, so you can find your regional hub leader who can support you in all things residency, all things implementation. And of course, our friends at the Residency Lab, they're offering application writing support sessions. I'll tell you right now that we can usually tell who has attended a support session and who has not in the application. They are extraordinarily beneficial. So if you are planning to apply for an expansion grant or another capacity grant, please do attend those sessions. And those sessions will be released or will be announced after we release our schedule for when the next RFAs are going to come out in the fall. So that information is all TBA.
Let's show Christina and Sarah some love for that amazing, thorough, helpful presentation. We're so grateful for our partners, and we're so grateful. Our annual symposium is underway, doing this in partnership with SR Tech. So if you haven't registered, please register today. We just released one of our keynotes. This is Dr. Sophia Noble, amazing pioneer in the forefront and looking at AI, bias in AI. And this is so important when we're thinking about what it is that our pre-service teachers need to know and understand and be able to do as they are preparing the next generation of learners. So it's going to be an amazing day in LA, an amazing couple of days in LA, May 2nd and 3rd. Register if you haven't already done so. And then always, 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 always thank you for sharing your feedback. Please take a moment to provide that feedback. And on the form, there's a link to it on our resource list. There's also going to probably be a link in the chat. We appreciate you. We thank you so much for joining us today. Please just take a couple minutes to fill that out. We use that to kind of design all of our supports for you. We appreciate you. Have a blessed and beautiful day. And thank you for joining us. Bye, everyone.